Hello everyone, I'm excited to share our work on evaluating human-robot interaction algorithms and shared autonomy via quality diversity scenario generation. And so since I've started my PhD, I've been asking myself this broad research question, which is how can we automatically generate scenarios to better understand and test the limits of complex HRI systems? So in other words, if you put a human and a robot in a room together and they're forced to interact, what could possibly happen? And so in this paper, what we do is we narrow our focus to the shared autonomy domain, where we have a human user that's trying to pick up some object, and it's taking actions through a robotic system. The system observes those human actions and infers the human's intent and assists the user in picking up one of those objects. And so one of the questions that we were thinking about in this paper is how are shared autonomy algorithms currently being evaluated? And so what we usually do is we invite human participants into the lab to run a user study. We put some objects neatly on a table in a straight line. We put a human in the room with a robot, and we ask them to pick up one of those objects, and we use the data from that experiment to figure out how well the system is working. The user studies are very useful, except we can't really test all the different configurations and scenarios for a system like this through just a user study, because we can't run millions of participants in our user studies every time we want to write a paper on human-robot interaction. And so one thing to think about is, like, what are the possible failures for a system like this? And so in order to understand the different kinds of scenarios that can happen in this shared autonomy example, we have to first define a scenario. And so we define a scenario as the human joystick inputs that the human is providing to control the shared autonomy system, as well as the object locations of all the objects on the table that we're trying to pick up. And so it's very natural to try to frame this problem as an optimization problem where we maximize completion time. But if you run this kind of optimization process, you end up finding human actions that are adversarial or random, or you end up with objects that are very close together, because that makes it very hard to infer intent. And so the problem here is we're giving the optimization algorithm complete control over the scenario, and of course it's going to find scenarios like this. So instead, in this paper, we frame this problem as a quality diversity problem, and we use the algorithm maplites to find our scenarios. So it's searching this high-dimensional scenario space, and then still trying to maximize the objective of completion time. However, it's going to diversify according to some measures that we give the system to get different kinds of scenarios out. And so what we use as our measures in this experiment is the distance between objects. So we want scenarios where objects are very close together. We want scenarios where objects are very far apart and everywhere in between. And also the human variation on the actions that we're taking. And so what you get out of the maplites algorithm when you run it on the scenario generation problem is a heat map, where each of these cells is a different scenario for the shared autonomy domain. And so now we can run these scenarios on a real robot, where the robot has to try to pick up this T, and we're controlling the robot through our joystick. So here we go through a few example scenarios. So here's a scenario out here to the right where we have high variation in human actions, and we can show you what that failure looks like. So here the human takes a very strong action to the right and tries to pick up the wrong object, and then the human ends up moving away to, like, oh no, I went to the wrong object, now I want to go towards the T, and has to fight with the system a little bit. But this is an expected failure. We were very surprised to find failures over here where the human is nearly taking completely optimal actions. And so when we were testing the system manually, we didn't come up with any scenarios that looked like this, so we were surprised to see something in this area of the map. And so here's the low variation failure. All you do is you put the second object in front of the T, and then if you're taking optimal actions towards the second object, the system thinks that you want to pick up the first object because the first object is closer, and it uses a distance-based cost function. So if you're interested in this topic of scenario generation for robust human-robot interaction, you can also check out our second paper that we have at RSS this year that studies more complex environments in human-robot coordination.